Let's talk about Dandelion Wine by Ray Bradbury, technically the first in the Greentown trilogy or series of novels. It mostly connects to number 3. Number 2, currently reading over my Discord, Something Wicked This Way Comes, is less connected. So, I'll read the blurb. A moving recollection of a magical small-town summer. In the backwaters of Illinois, Douglas Spaulding's grandfather makes an intoxicating brew from harvested dandelions. In a distillation of all that is eternal about boyhood and summer, Spaulding wistfully ponders over magical tennis shoes and machines for every purpose from time travel to happiness. Based on Bradbury's own experiences growing up in Waukegan in the 1920s, Dandelion Wine is the author's most deeply personal work, a heady mixture of fond memories, forgiveness, the imagination, and above all, of summers that seem to go on forever. A haunting, nostalgic novel, the Washington Post says. Dandelion Wine is among the best of his earthbound works. He wrote about life on this planet in a richly poetic style that often makes the familiar world seem as fantastic and mysterious as the distant future or outer space, and no other writer uses language with greater originality and zest. Sunday Telegraph. It won the 2007 Pulitzer Special Citation. So it's not sci-fi, it's not fantasy. It sometimes reads like sci-fi or fantasy. It has, if you like, the very lightest sci-fi elements. What I mean is there are occasionally hints of weird technology, but given even in Bradbury's sci-fi, often the technology and the science is a cover for other things he actually wants to talk about. He's very almost explicitly allegorical, if you can be, in that way. But here, those tiny hints, they're not particularly big. They're not serious technology. It's not sci-fi. It's just real life. Him remembering the summer of 1928, I think. Particularly 1928 or something like that. And remembering being a young teenager. Douglas is Bradbury, though not, I'm sure, completely. Douglas and his brother Tom live with their parents, and they stay with their grandparents over the summer and their great-grandmother. And Douglas is at a threshold. He's at a cusp age. I think he's 13, either 12 or 13 at the start of the novel. And he is, he's at a threshold of learning and of discovery. And at 12, he is. He's 13 in the sequel. He's at a threshold, and he is learning about life over this long, endless summer of heat. And he deals with the pursuit of happiness, with the nature of family, with the sort of existential fears we all have, with change, with death, with the danger of violence, with desire. All these things in different ways come up, and it comes up in this small city, large town. It's a backwater, but it's still a place that can have over 30, 40 stores, so it's several thousand people live there, at least in the 1920s, and it's Bradbury, so the biggest stuff going on is beautiful, poignant imagery in writing, and well realised, to be fair, well sketched and realised characters and situations, and here there's also an arc, and that's not universal to his books. I think this might have been a fix-up technically. I'm not sure if it may have been a fix-up of short stories, but it does have an arc covering it of Douglas's summer, and the things that happen to other people, the stories about other people, Doug always finds out about, and he's always like, this is how I feel about it. So he's always the observer, he's our proxy. There are a couple as well, 2 main great Bradbury horror sequences, both based around or touching upon this place called the Ravine, in the middle of the city or the town, which you don't go on a bridge over, you descend onto the footbridge crossing the ravine at the bottom. And this is also where the town dump is, and it's this symbol of decay and the wild and those things beyond your control. And it's interesting, it's a split in the middle of town, it's unavoidable. There's a couple of horror sequences around that, and it's not horror in the vein of Stephen King, though Stephen King likes the demi-sequel to this, Something Wicked This Way Comes, which I mentioned. But it's got that Bradbury, he is the much less the writer of summer, like here, though this is a great summer book, and much more the writer of autumn. I think to some of his most famous books, The October Country, The Halloween Tree, Something Wicked This Way Comes, indeed. And so I think he is, it's a natural mode for him to go into, and it's very effective and creepy. Beyond that, he's just a great writer. Well, he felt sorry for boys who lived in California, where they wore tennis shoes all year and never knew what it was to get winter off your feet, peel off the iron leather shoes all full of snow and rain, and run barefoot for a day, and then lace on the first new tennis shoes of the season, which was better than barefoot. The magic was always in the new pair of shoes. The magic might die by the 1st of September, but now in late June there was still plenty of magic. And shoes like these could jump you over trees and rivers of houses, and if you wanted, they can jump you over fences and sidewalks and dogs. God bless the lawnmower, he thought. Who was the fool who made January 1st New Year's Day? No, they should set a man to watch the grasses across 1 million Illinois, Ohio and Iowa lawns. And on that morning when it was long enough for cutting, instead of ratchets and horns and yelling, there should be a great swelling symphony of lawnmowers reaping fresh grass upon the prairie lands. Instead of confetti and serpentine, people should throw grass spray at each other on the one day each year that really represents the beginning. These are random quotes, by the way. After supper, for no reason at all, with a senseless certainty of motion, she watched her own hands, like a pair of ghostly gloves at a seance, gather together certain items in a perfumed kerchief. Then she went to her front porch and stood there stiffly for half an hour. Many things like that. And the themes he addresses of history and childhood, he has a number of very old people in their 90s. So they're rarities. But people who remember a lot and connect the kids particularly to the past. There's a lot of that, and it's notable that that's the thing he thinks about 30 years later, over 30 years later for him indeed. Bradbury thinks, what do I remember? And he thinks of these old people who made him remember. And that's one of the great kind of human and really really existential human moments, isn't it? Or human experiences of this sudden awe of the connection we can have generationally if we seek it out and if we recognise it and if we don't despise it. And he's very good at that. He's very good at realising the hopes and fears of characters and describing them, and he's positive. He likes people. Bradbury can have this is not a downbeat book, I would say, but he can have a slightly sombre or poignant or sad tone in stories here, but certainly elsewhere as well. Martian Chronicles is a good example of that. But he certainly can have he can be frank about the danger and terror of life. There's some stuff in The Illustrated Man that's very good on that. But here, I think the tone is really his heart tone that's always there, that he loves people. He's euanthropic. He likes people. He wants good for them. And in this town where there are decent people, and there are people who have built a community together, and there are people who value each other and that community, for Bradbury, that is, this is somewhere where some good things can happen, and where value can be in some small ways retained. So yeah, I enjoyed it a lot. It's the main criticism I'd give is that Bradbury because he's a tonal writer, when he's writing about kids and from the perspective of kids, and it's very obvious here, most of all the books I've read of his, or short stories I've read of his, there's very rich sweetness. It is slightly schmaltzy, basically, and I think some people won't like it at all. That's fine. I liked it, but it definitely was something where I dipped in and out a couple of times. I kind of left it and came back a couple of times. I didn't find it hard to read, and I didn't go like, oh, I'll read a chapter. I can't stand more than 4 pages or 8 pages. I really enjoyed it, but it wasn't something which, because of that, I sometimes just had to be like, yeah, go and have something else to wash that out. Beyond that, there's no great plot, there's no great drama. I don't think that's a criticism. You may. I liked it a lot. It's not a bad introduction, probably, to some aspects of Bradbury as a writer. it's still useful to go to, of the stuff I've read, Martian Chronicles, Illustrated Man are the obvious places. Anyway, that is me for today. Tell me what you think in the comments if you've read it, or if you've read other Bradbury books, tell me what you think of those, and I'll see you next time.